I'm sure based on the questions we've received so far, you're joining us today because you might be anxious about what's coming to your department, or you might be equally eager to look at retiring early. As we navigate through these times of change, I want to reassure you that ACFO team is here to support and guide you. While currently only 2 departments, IRCC and ATSSC, have been notified about upcoming workforce adjustments, I understand this can create a lot of uncertainty and concern for everyone. We're committed to supporting every single one of you to help you better understand the process and to know what to expect, which is why we're here today. We posted lots of information in our member support center on our website about WFA to support you. History has shown during exercises like DRAP that our community has been minimally affected and very few members left the public service unwillingly. To those who are affected, we're here for you. We've already launched resources like the ACFO-ACAF Alternation Network on the member portal, which allows employees to connect about alternating positions and either alternating out or finding a new role within the public service. Please rest assured that we're dedicated to keeping you informed, providing support, preparing you for the future. Stay tuned for more information and don't hesitate to reach out to me or our labor relations team if you need assistance. On that note, I'm happy to introduce our labor relation advisors, Nicholas Brunette de Sousa. Hello, Nicholas. And Ben Stretch. Welcome, Ben. Thanks, everyone, and I'll turn it over to Nick. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name's like Rob said, my name's Nicholas. I'm a labor relations advisor with the association. I've been around for about 13 years now, and I was there last round of bargaining, workforce adjustment. So I have a bit of experience with that process. And my colleague Ben is with me today. Ben has been the point of contact for the Alternation network that we launched a few weeks ago. So today we'd like to take a little bit of time. We have a presentation for you. We're also, as Rob said, we're happy to receive your questions via Slido. Give me 1 second because my PowerPoint crashed on me here. But feel free to add questions throughout the presentation, and we will make sure to make some time to answer them at the end of today's presentation. So give me 1 second here. I have to reboot PowerPoint, unfortunately, and we will get going. All right. All right. So what is workforce adjustment? Workforce adjustment and what you need to know. So what is workforce? Workforce adjustment occurs when we decide that the services that, when the deputy heads decide that the services of one or some indeterminate employees is no longer required. Usually it'll occur for one of 4 situations, either a lack of work, a discontinuance of a function, a relocation. So when the pay center, for instance, moved to Miramichi, that was a relocation of services. You'll also see it with an alternative delivery initiative. An alternative delivery initiative is usually a service is being transferred out. So we saw it a few years ago when the First Nations Health Authority took over First Nations Health. That was an alternative delivery initiative where the service is transferred out of the government into the First Nations Health Authority. But what we're probably going to see in the next little while are related to either a lack of work or a discontinuance of a function. Those are the items we'll see, but workforce adjustment can occur at any given time. So I know one of the questions we received in preparation for this was, when will we know? When is it going to happen? Unfortunately, workforce adjustment can happen at any given time. There's not a timeline on when it can occur, but there is notice requirements to the bargaining agents, and then if an employee was ever to be surplus, there are timelines on that, and we'll talk a little bit about that today throughout the presentation. Workforce adjustment is based on your substantive position. So if you're in an acting position currently, or on assignment, or on secondment, it will be based, any decisions that's taken regarding your employment would be related to your substantive position. So you may get recalled to do a SERLO if your substantive position was affected. You wouldn't get a notice of affected if you're in your acting role. It would be in your substantive role. So we'll talk a little bit about SERLO in a bit, but just I did want to let people know it's based on substantive positions, not acting or secondments or yeah. It's not to push out specific employees either. So a workforce adjustment exercise is about positions, not people. So when when the employer is making a decision about workforce adjustment and changing services, they're looking at the positions that people occupy and not who's sitting in the box. So that's why I remember back in 2012, I got a call. Someone said, I'm a Succeed Plus or a surplus in my performance evaluations. I don't understand how I received an affected letter and members on another team. I find I am performing better than them. It's because it's the box in which they're sitting in and not who they are or what they do. What does being affected mean? So we've been hearing, it's one of the terms you'll probably hear a lot in the future and in the short term, is being an affected employee. What does that mean? It means that your department is considering making changes to your position or your team. It means that your position may be impacted by the change. It's not a guarantee that your position will be impacted. You'll receive a letter, but it's not a notice of termination. It means that your position may be surplus, or your position could be deemed eventually unaffected. So back in 2011, 2012, 2013, when workforce adjustment happened, we saw a lot more members be affected than actually surplused and laid off. So to give you an example, if there's a team of 5 CT Fins doing the same type of work in systems, well, if there was to be workforce adjustment and we had to get rid of one of those 5 positions, likely what would happen is all 5 employees would be deemed affected because they're all doing similar work, and they would go through a SERLO process. Again, I'll come back to that point, but only one of them would eventually become surplus. The other 4 employees would be deemed unaffected at the end of that SERLO process and would continue on in their public service career. While you're affected, you're still an employee. You're still continuing to do your current duties. You're still being paid for your position, accumulating pensionable time. Like I said, you'll get a letter and you may be asked to participate in a SERLO process. So how will it be determined which positions are affected? It's the deputy heads that determine which positions are deemed affected based on which roles may be impacted by organizational change. So if you're in financial operations and we're not going to be offering a certain service, or you're in systems and we're not going to be doing that, that's where you may be deemed affected. It'll be based on the nature of the work that's being impacted by the organizational changes and where we see a need to go moving forward. Usually, like I've said, if positions are similar, if we're doing similar work on a similar team, we're likely all going to be deemed affected together. Because again, we're looking at the positions and the nature of the work and not the people. I can't just can't say, well, I don't particularly like Ben, so I'm going to, will affect and surplus Ben, and I know everybody else does the same work, but I like those guys. You have to actually go through the whole process of giving everybody a chance to remain in the public service. So you're affected. What next? So if you're affected, likely one of 3 scenarios will play out. You'll either be asked to participate in a selection for retention layoff process, which we're about to speak about. You can be deemed surplus, which is where your employment, essentially your position, is eliminated, or you can be deemed unaffected, which, as I've said, is where after review, your position won't be eliminated or your employment won't be put to an end. So you just continue on with your public service career. So what is a SERLO? What is a select? It's a selection for retention and layoff process. So if you hear the term SERLO, that's what it means. It's a process to determine who will be retained in the public service and who will be laid off. It'll occur when some, but not all employees are laid off. So if we're eliminating a complete team, then we'll probably just surplus employees, as opposed to if we know that we're going to downsize from 6 positions to 4, then we'll likely do a selection for retention process with the employees that have similar functions within a team. The basis of a selection for retention process is that all the employees already meet merit. They're all occupying, if we're doing a SERLO for the CT Fin 3s, they're all already CT Fin 3s in those positions. They meet the merit of being a CT Fin 3. Deputy heads, though, have considerable discretion regarding what's the choice of the merit criteria and selecting the criteria, the criteria tool and the means for assessing. So it does fall into management's discretion. How are we going to assess the needs of organization moving forward? And that is the test. That is what we're supposed to be establishing, or the employer is supposed to be establishing when they are going through workforce adjustment, is what are the current needs of the organization and the future needs of the organizations, and how do I retain the employees with the skills and competencies to serve those purposes. Essential qualifications will be based on the current needs of the organization. So what are the projects? What are the things that our team is responsible for now? Those will be the essential. Those will be what we base to determine the essential qualifications. While the asset qualifications can be based on the future needs of the organization. So we're not just looking at what we're doing now. We're also looking at, okay, what's our business going to be going forward with the organization? It's not a seniority-based decision. It's really a needs over the organization-based decision. So whether you're the newest employee or the oldest employee in an organization isn't going to determine whether you stay in the public service or not. It will be based on retention will be based on our qualifications for the current needs and the future needs of the organization. It shouldn't be an exercise, again, based on employees, whether they have employment issues or disciplinary issues. It's based on the qualifications we have to meet those needs of the organization. This isn't an exercise in trying to get rid of employees we don't like. It's not an exercise in getting rid of employees we see as problems. This is the elimination of a position and giving everybody a fair chance to compete for those positions. If you do find that there are abuses in that process, that's where you should be calling us in labor relations, and where we can look at the file with you and look at your circumstances and have a conversation about what are your rights on that stuff. So what are the steps in the SERLO process? It's kind of a 7-step process, the SERLO process. The first step is the employer determines what part of the organization is affected. Is it systems? Is it operations? Is it financial planning? What are those? What parts of the organization? Is it a part of systems? Is it a part of planning? Is it audit? They'll look at that. It's the employer that decides those things. I suspect departments have sent suggestions to Privy Council, and Privy Council likely to make those determinations. The employer identifies subsequently what are similarly affected positions and employees. So what boxes are occupying those roles that we are looking to reduce or that we're discontinuing the service. And those are the boxes that we will at that point affect. The employer then has to determine what's the selection strategy. So what are the criteria we're going to use to determine what are our ongoing needs and future needs, and establish that. So we're affecting our employees, we're establishing a merit criteria and determining the selection criteria. We're then determining what's the assessment method. How are we going to assess that they meet these merit criteria? Is it going to be interviews? Is it going to be a test? Is it going to be scenarios? There's a lot of discretion in how, similarly to a staffing process, you'll see a lot of discretion in how the employer can establish those assessments. Once that's done, the employer determines which employees are to be retained and which employees are to be laid off. So we go through the process, we assess those qualifications, and then we establish who's to be retained, who's going to get laid off, and the employer finally communicates that information to the employees. If an employee is selected for layoff, they'll be deemed surplus. If employees are deemed to be retained, they should be advised that they are no longer an affected employee, and they would continue on with their roles in the organization. So I've mentioned surplus employee several times today. And what is a surplus employee? A surplus employee is an employee whose position has been eliminated. If that occurs to one of our members, the member will receive notice in writing. You'll get a letter. It'll say your position has been, your services aren't needed for, it'll tell you which reason, usually with discontinuing service, lack of work, ADI, relocation of a work unit. It will tell you the reason why, and it will usually give you a date as to when your services are no longer needed. At that point, the employee will also be told one of two things. The employer will either say that they are guaranteed a reasonable job offer, or you'll often hear the term GRJO. That means that the employer, and I guess we'll get into that term, it's the next slide, or they'll be deemed an opting employee. And in the next couple slides, we'll talk about what's the difference between those two things. So let's talk about a GRJO. A GRJO or a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, is the first avenue the employer has to consider. So the whole point of the Workforce Adjustment Directive is to try to retain people in the public service as much as possible. So if we're going to eliminate a position, the first thing we have to do as the employer is look at, can I guarantee that I can re-employ this person in a different role? If I can, I have an obligation as an employer to offer a GRJO. When I'm offering a GRJO, that person's position is eliminated, but I'm guaranteeing them an opportunity in a new position. The person will continue to work and be compensated within the organization in the interim of me offering them a new position. The employee won't be laid off unless they decline a reasonable job offer. A reasonable job offer doesn't mean that if you're working in Vancouver, you'll be offered a job in Winnipeg. Generally, it'll be in your area, in your current area, unless you've identified that you're willing to look at jobs in other areas or other cities. That can change eventually. So if you've been on the priority list for say 2 years and we haven't secured a job for you, then the employer could say, we've made reasonable efforts to try to offer you a reasonable job in your area. We're going to expand that area. There's case law on that but in general, the employer must first look at that area and make actual and concrete efforts to try to offer a reasonable job within your area. So if you were offered a GRJO package, you don't expect that, I live in Ottawa right now, I'm going to have to move to Saskatoon tomorrow. Employees who do receive a GRJO are not eligible for a package and can't do an alternation. And we'll talk a little bit about what an alternation is in a few slides, and packages with regards to opting employees. But essentially, if you're offered a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, that's what's available to your priority employee for positions, and we go from there. So what is an opting employee? So if the employer can't guarantee you a reasonable job offer, they will deem you an opting employee. An opting employee, again, similarly to someone who's received a GRJO, their position's been eliminated, but the employer can't guarantee you continued employment in the public service. At that point, you'll also receive a letter. It'll express that to you, but the letter will give you 120 days to pick one of 3 options. The first option is, similarly to people on that get GRJOs, to go on the priority list. So the priority list is a list that allows employees to be reappointed or appointed to positions in priority to other employees. That priority is for 12 months. During that 12 months, you continue to work in the public service, you continue to be paid, It should still be pensionable time because you're a public servant. But at the end of the 12 months, if you haven't secured employment, contrary to someone who's got a GRJO who remains on the list, your time in the public service would come to an end and you'd be laid off and be no longer a public servant. If you were laid off, you would still have a layoff priority for an additional year where you could get reappointed to the public service, but you wouldn't be a public servant at the end of that 12 months. The second option is a resignation with a transitional support measure. So in that scenario, you resign from the public service, but you are provided with some money. And we'll talk a little bit more about the transitional support measure in a couple of slides. But essentially, it's a sum of money. You can also get a pension waiver. And again, I'll dwell more into that in the next slides. This third option is to resign from the public service and receive a TSM and an educational allowance, which is some money to go back to school. If an employee doesn't make a choice in the 120 days, it will be deemed that you chose option A, so that you wanted to go on the priority list. So option A. Option A is a 12-month priority. Like I said, you continue to get paid, you continue during your priority period, and you continue to work. If no position, you're laid off. And the 12 months, the one thing I haven't mentioned yet is that the 12 months can be extended by any remaining opting period. So if you decide that you would like to go on the priority list and you want to maximize, you decide, I want to maximize my time on the priority list. You could decide on day 1 of 120 to go on the priority list, and you could request that the additional 119 days be added to your priority period, which is something that the employer would do upon request. So then you don't just have the year, you have a year and 119 additional days. But what does it mean to have a priority? So a priority status, like I said, is a special consideration for appointment in the public service. There are two types of priorities for surplus employees. There are employees who have a statutory priority. So statutory priority comes from the statute, the law. It's the highest level of priority. They're treated in accordance to a certain order. There are 5 types of statutory priorities, if I'm not mistaken. And workforce adjusted within your own department is one of the highest priorities in the public service. As a surplus employee, you're also a regulatory priority. It's a secondary type of priority. It falls below the statutory priority. So statutory, if there were 2 employees on the priority list, one had a statutory priority and one had a regulatory priority, the statutory priority would be appointed first. But regulatory priorities fall ahead of an employee who doesn't have a priority to be appointed in the public service, and the priority order on that list is based on order of being registered on the priority list. Employees who are laid off also have a priority. Like I said, they have a priority for 1 year after their layoff to be reappointed in the public service if they wish to be. Surplus employees are also have some retraining available to them. Can be retrained for a specific or an anticipated vacancy if there are no other qualified priorities. So the employer does have an obligation to retrain you, but if there are people that are already have those qualifications and have a priority, then they don't necessarily have an obligation to go ahead and retrain someone. Home departments are the ones that are responsible for the retraining. And if you're getting retrained for a position in a different department, then your home department continues to be your employer unless the other department agrees to make you a conditional offer and that you switch over. If you're doing a retraining plan, your layoff can actually be extended until the end of your retraining plan. That said, if an employee fails their retraining, they can be laid off at the end of their surplus period. If you were ever interested in retraining and you requested it and it was denied to you, you are entitled to a meeting and an explanation as to why are we denying your retraining, which is something certainly you can also ask that one of the members on our team attends with you. You do have responsibilities as an employee if you were ever a surplus employee. So that had chosen option A or that you had received a GRJO, you do have to actively seek alternative employment. That includes registering for the priority system. So the priority system, you're not automatically put on the list. It does take some consents on your behalf. It does take that you fill out some forms. So under the Workforce Adjustment Directive, you do have an obligation to take those tangible steps to seek alternative employment. It's your responsibility as well to look into information on your entitlements and your obligations, so benefits, etc. What are you entitled to? What kind of trainings? To inform yourself, to provide timely information to assist with the appointment activities. So you should be available, accessible to answer questions, to participate in interviews. Which is similarly to what the next point is, that you should be easily available to be contacted by the PSC or an appointing department. So you should stop answering your phone for 6 months. You should be answering and participating when invited to do so. So you should also be attending those referrals. If you were ever referred to a position, you shouldn't say, well, I don't like that position. It's not necessarily like a right to pick and choose and wait for your dream job. The right of someone with a GRJO is to a reasonable job offer. Whether that's someone's dream job or not, maybe up for debate. And yeah, you have to seriously consider opportunities that are presented to you, including training and relocation. Let's talk about option B. So option B, like I said, was resignation with a transitional support measure. Transitional support measure is a cash payment. The entitlement is kind of like a bell curve. It'll go up and down. So it increases from year 0 to 16. It maxes out at year 16 and stays the same at 52 weeks up until year 29. And then gradually from year 30 to 45 of service, it decreases year over year. It is not pensionable time, and it is, from what I understand, a taxable. It is taxable. I know that was a couple of questions that we received earlier, so I just wanted to point that out. Employees do have to resign if they take option B. However, for the purposes of severance, you are considered an employee who was laid off. So you would be entitled to layoff severance, which is in your collective agreement. It's based on years of service. If you've been in the public service for a while and you had taken a lump sum several years ago to cash out voluntary severance, there would be a deduction for that time. The TSM can be paid out in 1 payment or 2 payments over a max of 2 years. Pension waivers. So with option B, you can receive a pension waiver. If you're eligible for that, there are conditions to meet for a pension waiver. If you were part of the pension plan before 2013, then you must be at least 55 years of age. If you join the pension plan after that, you must be at least 60 years of age. You must have been employed for at least 10 years in the public service and must have at least 2 years of pensionable service. Before you make any decisions on pensions or you have questions, the pension center is the center of expertise on that. Any pension questions should be validated with the pension center, though they are the agency that has the expertise to guide you on that process. Option C is a TSM with the educational allowance. So you still get the money you received under option B, but you can get additional money up to $17,000 in an educational allowance. So that is money to go back to school. It doesn't have to be a specific university or a college course. For instance, if you're in Winnipeg, it may qualify to go to the Royal Winnipeg Ballet School and take ballet classes. Or, if you've always wanted to be a realtor, maybe there's a realtor course that you can take. You do have to keep receipts and be able to present those for those reimbursements. And with option C, there are 2 options. You can resign and receive your severance right away, or you can delay your departure and go on leave without pay for a maximum of 2 years while you're completing your courses. If you do delay your departure, you can continue to contribute to your benefits and your benefit plan and your pension plan. You would have a requirement to contribute both the employer and the employee portion. The one big difference between the TSM option B and option C, along with the educational allowance, is that you would not be eligible for a pension waiver. So for those who would consider retiring, you wouldn't be able to get that waiver if you chose option C. Counseling affected and surplus employees. So the employer does have a series of obligations to assist and explain to you certain things. They will usually have a departmental person who's responsible for counseling you with the topics that are on the screen right now. So the directive itself, the priority information management system, which is a system where if you're a priority employee, you need to register and submit your stuff. The employer should have tools to assist you with your CV or your resume. Should be informing you of your rights and your obligations under the directive and the workforce adjustment rules. They should be able to provide you with counsel on your current situation, so your pay, your benefits, severance, pension, classification, your language rights, your years of service. All that is something that the department should be able to provide you as if you are going through the workforce adjustment process. Alternatives on what might be available to you as an employee. You should be able to get counsel from the employer on the odds of successfully being appointed, the meaning of WFA terminology. So if there are terms that you don't understand, you can ask your departmental counselor on that. You can also contact us. We're always happy to have those conversations. The alternation process, so they should be helping you in guiding you through that process. And yeah, the employee assistance program, along with several others that are in the directive, to highlight a few. There could be a voluntary departure program that is created through workforce, if workforce adjustment was to happen. So a voluntary departure program is a program that the employer can institute where people can volunteer to leave. So the public service, it can only happen, be established if once people are affected, but before you actually do any SERLOs. It's mandatory if there are more than 5 employees in the same working unit at the same group and level that are affected by workforce adjustment, and it's voluntary if there are less than 5 employees affected. If they were to have a voluntary departure program in your department and you were to volunteer, you can't select option A. So the purpose of the voluntary departure program is to see departures from the public service. So only option B and C would be available to you. You would not be able to go on the priority list under that option. Alternation. So alternation occurs when an opting employee, so someone who has received their options letter, exchanges positions with a non-affected employee. An alternation is only available to someone who has received their opting letter or who has chosen option A. So now if you choose option A, so remember I was saying, well, if I choose option A, I can add that time. You can add the time on the priority list without losing the opportunity to actually alternate with someone if at some point you were like, I can't find anything, but I'm interested in remaining, and I just met Rob, and Rob's willing to alternate with me. Rob and I can still alternate even if I had already chosen option A. That's new actually from this round of, from the most recent round of updating the workforce adjustment directive. That was something the bargaining agents advocated for, and that is now in the directive. So if you choose option A, you can alternate. It's not automatic that an alternation will occur. It does require that there is the retention of skills when we do an alternation. So there will be alternations that could be denied. We saw it in 2011, 2012, 2013. So it is important to know that it's not all automatic. You have to meet the requirements. Actually, the person alternating out of the public service, if they will be in the position for more than 5 days, also has to meet the requirements of the position. Alternation should be at the same group and level or equivalent position. So it can be between classifications. We did see that. Usually equivalent is about 6%, is under 6%, but you can see that, and you can see it between different departments. So if I'm at CBSA and I want to alternate with someone at environment, that is possible to be done. If an alternation was denied, you are entitled again to be met and to be provided with an explanation as to why it was denied. As Rob mentioned, there is an ACFO alternation network. That is a tool to connect members that are interested in alternating with each other. While ACFO will publish the list of candidates, it is up to the members to contact each other and to work with their respective management. So this was really a tool that we created during the last big workforce adjustment exercise because members were really having a hard time finding each other on the government-wide alternation network, where often advertising the desire to alternate was getting lost in the bigger picture. But this is where, while we will provide a list, members need to be proactive. It is a voluntary option. It's not mandatory. You're not required to want to alternate, but if you do want to, it will be an option. The alternation network will be eventually available, I think it may already be, within the member portal. So we did have some questions about, it used to be published openly online. We are switching that into the membership portal, so only members will be able to see it. And if you're ever interested in participating in alternation, that is where you can contact my dear colleague Ben that you guys met at the start of this chat, who is responsible for the alternation network. Salary protection. There is salary protection if you are appointed to a lower level positions. Members are then entitled to salary protection. That protection will remain until you're appointed to a position with an equal or higher salary. So something to be aware of. Severance. The directive doesn't prevent you from getting severance. So if you do, for instance, choose option B, you get your TSM. You also, like I said, get your severance. And any resignations under the directive will be considered involuntary layoff for the purpose of severance. That brings me to our last slide, which is just, if you ever do need more help, that is what our labor relations team is there to do. You can always reach out to us and ask any questions that you may have. We're happy to help to the best of our abilities. Ben and I are here on behalf of the labor relations team today, but all of my colleagues are very competent and very, very happy to assist members with their needs, whether that's workforce adjustment or something else. On that note, I will turn this off and I will suggest that we can maybe go to some Slido questions. I will hand it over to my colleague Ben to see what's been happening on Slido while I've been chatting.
Thanks, Nick. So yeah, we can take the time now to go through some of the questions. So the first question there, if an FI is surplus, how can ACFO help the FI find a job within the FI community? So there's a few things that ACFO can support with. So first off, as Nick mentioned, we do have our alternation network that's available to kind of help facilitate alternations and kind of make it easier for opting and surplus members to be able to find a non-affected member who might be interested in leaving the public service. We also provide a lot of resources and education in terms of making sure that you understand your rights and your entitlements. For example, as Nick mentioned, the employer is required to provide you counseling on things like the Workforce Directive, the Workforce Adjustment Directive, sorry, things like helping you with preparing a resume or a CV. And so we also make sure that you understand your rights in terms of what you're entitled to. I will note that as Nick mentioned, if you are an employee who opted for option A, or you've been given a GRJO, You do also have some responsibilities yourself, so you are also expected to kind of be looking for job opportunities yourself. So while we can kind of point you in the right direction, answer any questions you have, and support you throughout the process, there is also an expectation that you're looking for jobs yourself, because at the end of the day, if you're not applying to anything, then that really lowers the chances that you're going to be able to find another job in the FI community. Question number 2. Does ACFO have statistics on employees that are eligible for retirement and/or alternating if required? Go ahead, Nick.
Thanks, Ben. So this isn't something that we particularly keep track of, employees' retirement and whether their retirement age. Members can technically retire at any given time, so I can't say we have a list of retirees. That said, what I can tell you is that I am aware that we are getting lots of questions about alternations. I think we have, um, if there are members that are interested in alternation, there are people that will be interested in alternations, and we saw that with the last round of workforce adjustment, where we had lots of individuals who are interested both in staying in the public service and leaving the public service. But we don't statistically keep that database of our members.
The next question, the wait is unbearable. Is my department obligated to provide a timeline or deadline for when we can expect an update or a clear understanding of their plan? Yeah, so we definitely, definitely empathize with the fact that, workforce adjustments is stressful for members. There's not really a fixed timeline or deadline for workforce adjustments in this case. So departments don't have a deadline for when they need to make a decision as to whether they're doing workforce adjustments or not. So they are required to notify us when they've made the decision that workforce adjustments are happening and that members are going to be affected. But even after members have been affected, there's no kind of set deadline in terms of when they need to have made decisions in terms of what members are going to be unaffected and what members are going to be surplus. So typically they do try to go as quickly as possible, and they are required to notify us of workforce adjustments to our members as soon as they've made that decision. But there's not really kind of a fixed timeline or deadline where, if they've made their decision, they now have 3 weeks to decide if you're surplus or something like that. They don't have a fixed deadline like that.
Yeah, and I can take the next one if you want, Ben.
Sure.
So the next one is, what is the likelihood that other departments will surplus employees, especially under conservative government? When do you foresee downsizing occurring? What other departments should we expect this in 2025, 2026? I don't have any insider information on which departments may, impact employees and which departments may not. I have, if we're looking at the news, I would suspect that there will probably be some other departments that make announcements, but what's the breadth of that is hard to tell at this point, in the sense that even some departments haven't actually heard back on their plans to manage government spending yet from Treasury Board or from Privy Council. Some departments are telling us that their hope is to manage things through attrition. So if we see that, we may have lower numbers in workforce adjustment than people may be anticipating, but it'll all depend on what happens. A change in government can certainly lead to a different strategy on resource management within the public service. If we look at what happened in 2011, the deficit reduction action plan was kind of announced in 2011, and they gave departments 3 years to kind of align their finances with the deficit reduction would drop. So could that happen again? It could. It could be a totally different strategy. But what I can say is, as an association, is we're engaged to keep you guys informed as we have information. We're just not in a position yet to kind of give you guys that guidance.
So the next question, will language be a factor in deciding what positions are cut when some team members are workforce adjusted? What about CPA? What about time spent in the department and the role? So when managers are kind of doing a SERLO process to determine what members are going to be laid off and what members are going to be retained, they may take into account kind of qualifications that are considered an asset, both for current needs and future operational needs. So things like language skills and CPA, it's kind of a little bit gray there because on the one hand, those may or may not be assets that are needed now or in the future. So for example, if your role is BBB, but manager thinks that in the future, they want CBC is what the profile is going to be moving forwards. Then if you have kind of higher language skills, that may be something that benefits you. On the other hand, if your role is English Essential and moving forwards, they expect it's going to stay as English Essential, then the fact that you may have your B levels, that may not be something that really moves the needle a lot when determining merit because it may not be something that's deemed as kind of a current need for that area. In terms of time spent in the department and the role, so seniority is not something that's considered in a SERLO process. So if you've, if you've been here, you have 10 years of service, that doesn't mean necessarily that, your colleague who has 5 years of service is more likely to be deemed surplus than you are. So again, it is based on merit. So if you've spent longer in the department and you've kind of gained more, and so you have kind of additional skills and experiences from your time spent in the department, that may benefit you, but kind of just the hours or the days that you've been in the department won't necessarily determine, whether you're laid off or retained.
Looking at the next question, do we know if there will be cuts in all departments or in certain departments less likely to be affected? We don't know that there'll be cuts in every department. In some departments, I think like I said, there may be some attrition management. There may actually not be a mandate in some of the smaller departments too. It could go either way. What I would say is there's no guarantees that there's going to be cuts all around at this time.
So the next question, what will ACF do to ensure that alternation is successful and that managers are fair and transparent in their staffing? So again, the alternation network is something that we do to facilitate alternation. Alternation typically occurs between employees that are at the same group and level. So we provide that information on the ACFO alternation network so that it's easier for you to find people that kind of have a similar position and you meet maybe the language requirements for the position and things like that. So we do that to make it easier to find somebody that you actually can match with. That said, all alternations do require management approval. If they do not approve an alternation, you are entitled to request a meeting for an explanation as to why that is. And so if you do find yourself in a case where you matched with somebody who was qualified, you were each qualified to do each other's positions, you can't see any reason why it would be not approved, and then management did not approve the alternation, and you feel that it's for unfair reasons, I encourage you to connect with us about that, and we can kind of walk through next steps. But yeah, in general, that's what the process would look like.
Looking at the next question, what support would ACFO provide in cases of obvious managerial favoritism in the WFA surplus selection process, where both favored and unfavored employees are represented by ACFO? How does the union provide advice? So on the latter question, if two members were ever in conflict, both members are always entitled to their own representatives. we take very seriously the confidentiality of our members, so never hesitate to contact us, whether you're having a conflict or you want to with another member, or whether you know another member has contacted us and you would like your representative. Both members would be entitled to a representative, and the two representatives would not talk to each other or disclose any information with one another that you have shared with the association. So always feel comfortable to reach out to us. If you believe that there is some abuses in the WFA process, you should certainly be contacting us, and we can definitely look at the circumstances and assess the matter with you and provide you with your rights. That could be whether that's filing a grievance, whether that's talking to another level of management, or with HR. There would be different options depending on what the concern is, and where you want to go with that. But that's what we're here for. We're here to talk out the options with you. So if that occurs or you feel that that might occur and you want to talk it out, just reach out to us. Thanks.
Do you continue working while on the priority list, or do you just get paid and spend time looking for work? So you do continue to work while you are on the priority list. That said, I think that typically some time is allocated for you to look for other positions. So if you've been given a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, or you've selected option A, you will continue to work, but typically you are given time to find another reasonable job, because they know that there's kind of a 12-month period where you're required to find one. So you will continue to work, but you will also likely get some time during the workday to seek out other opportunities.
The next question is, if an employee is surplus, can the wait time to obtain a job be part of pensionable years of service? If an employee takes 12-month package to retire, as in the case of IRCC, is the 12 months pensionable? So if you are on the priority list, you're still a public, as a surplus priority, you are still a public servant, and therefore that is pensionable time. You're still working in the government, you're still getting paid. So that is pensionable. If you're a layoff priority, that is no longer pensionable time, because you've left the public service. The TSM, as I think I mentioned during the presentation, that would not be pensionable time. It's a lump sum payment to the employee, based on their years of service, but it is a taxable sum of money. Thanks.
Can CTIIU employees, if workforce adjustment or GRJO occurs, obtain positions as CTFINs or CTEAVs and vice versa? So that would probably depend on a couple of things. The first thing would be, you're not going to get a position if you're not qualified for the position. So, if you're looking at a different position that you have the qualifications for, that's kind of step one to make sure that you actually can meet the criteria of the position. In terms of kind of alternating into or applying for something that's an equivalent position. An equivalent position is deemed as one if it has similar or the same duties and responsibilities, and at the highest end of the pay scale. So, the last step on the pay scale, if the difference between those steps is 6% or less, then those positions are considered equivalent. And if it was more than 6%, then they would not be considered equivalent. Nick, is there anything I'm missing on that?
No, I think you got that right. I think you covered that. I'll go to the next question, and I'll apologize now. There are 134 questions in the queue. We have about 4 minutes more that we can take questions. We'll answer as many questions as we can. What I can tell you is that your questions will help us draft some FAQs for and materials. And if you have a question that we haven't answered, you can always reach out to Ben, myself, and the rest of the LR team to answer questions. Is now a higher risk time to be taking on an assignment or secondment? I don't particularly think that you should stop yourself from taking an assignment or secondment, in the sense that if your position was ever impacted, it's based on your substantive position. You will get you will get the same opportunity as your colleagues to participate in a SERLO if there was a SERLO. So it doesn't decrease your chances of employment if the team in which you were on secondment or assignment was impacted by workforce adjustment. Your secondment or assignment may come to an end as that position may get filled via an employee who is impacted. But I don't think you should stop yourself from an opportunity. This process, like I said, in 2011 lasted 3 years and didn't always affect all parts of all organizations. So.
My current department is doing workforce adjustment. Since there's only 2 departments we know of right now doing workforce adjustment, what if I find another job and that department does workforce adjustment and I'm affected again? Then do I have to go through the WFA process again? Essentially, the answer to that is yes, you would. So if you alternate into a department that later decides that they're doing their own workforce adjustments, there's no sort of protection in alternation, where since you swapped in, now you can't be affected again. So that is a risk if you alternate into a department that has not done workforce adjustment. If they do it, then you might have to kind of go through that process again.
I'm BBB and my position is going to be CBC as of June as a result of a recent OL legislation. I do not expect to be able to get CBC as of June. Can I be WFA'd on the basis of not meeting the new requirement in my position? Again, workforce adjust. So language requirements are going to be based on the decisions. If you're already the incumbent in a position, you're entitled to stay in that position, and the department will have to work with the legislation. But for terms of WFA, it'll be based on, again, the criteria for going forward and current and ongoing measures, right? So if there is a SERLO, can language be a factor? I think Ben touched on that earlier. It can be a criteria. All the government, it depends on what the functions of the positions going forward are. But yeah, I think Ben, you covered a lot of that already too. So I'll stop there and we can take another question.
Yeah, what happens if I'm on assignment and my substantive position gets surplused? So your substantive or your kind of definitive position, your permanent position is going to be the one that kind of matters for a workforce adjustment process. So if that position gets surplused, typically you would not be able to keep your assignment. And so you would have to go through the workforce adjustment process for your substantive position. On the other hand, if your assigned position, like if your assigned position was impacted by workforce adjustments, you would typically just go back to your substantive position.
Looking at the time, Rob, maybe we'll hand it back to you, and yeah.
Okay. Special thanks to Nicholas and Ben for a great presentation. Thank you to the comms team for setting this up so quickly and smoothly, except for my part of it. As you can see, the questions are getting a lot down to more of the specific issues. So I would really like you to reach out to our LR team and ask your questions and get your answers that you require to move forward. I can tell you that I have been proactively reaching out to departments to try and gauge where they stand in terms of workforce adjustment or stopping the clock or not renewing term employees. It's a very tough time to get answers with the prorogation of government. Everything is kind of paused. It makes it challenging for the departments to give answers, and more so for us to be prepared. But I am proactively reaching out to as many departments as I can, meetings every week. So we're trying to get that information so that we can serve you like you deserve to be served. So if you hear anything, please reach out and let us know. I think that's about it. We have another call coming up in a minute, so we better end this call. Thank you so much for participating. Take care.